Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah rabbil alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. My name is Akhrun bin Musa and I'm currently serve as a senior assistant director at the Department of Islamic Development JAKIM Putrajaya. And today I'm going to present my master thesis under the title Toleration Al-Musamahah in Al-Ghazali's Ethical Thought. So this is the general outline of my presentations. I've divided the significance of this research into two different significance, which is the first one is the significance of this research in fulfilling the objective of research and the significance of this research to the public service. So the first one, I'm started with my problem statement. And of course, I put some quotation from Sayyid Naqi al-Attas from Islam and Secularism. Since I think most of the people understand secularism from the very political dimension, but Prophet Attas, as he mentioned in his very important works, that the components in the dimension of secularization are the disenchantment of nature, the desacralization of politics, and the deconsecrations of values. Of course, Prophet Attas highlighted that there is three elements of secularization, which I focusing only on the third component, which is the deconsecrations of values, which related to our judgment and our understanding of ethics and morality. Therefore, I have divided that understanding on ethics and morality from two worldviews, which the first one is modern secular worldview, which I understand as open to judgment and without any proper or permanent understanding of virtues and vices. Therefore, their older understandings of tolerance has shifted from the acceptance of the existence of different opinions into the acceptance of different opinions. I think there is quite significant different understanding on that virtues to show that even though the older tolerance, we still accept there is different opinion, but yet we still accept that there is existence of different opinions, but yet still we tolerate that opinion because at least from the modern secular worldview, they have the idea of freedom. But the new understanding of tolerance has shifted from the acceptance of the existence into the acceptance of the different opinions itself, meaning that there is no permanent understanding of the virtue of tolerance itself. Whereas from the worldview of Islam, we understand ethics and morality, or the values of right and wrong, based on Tawhidic method of knowledge. Therefore, we have a permanent understanding of the values and virtues. That's why in this study, try to understand what is the understanding of tolerance in Islam. Is it was understood in the modern secular worldview, or maybe we have a different understanding of these virtues. The objective of this research is to expound underlying worldview of tolerance and to explain Al-Ghazali's ethical foundation and to understand tolerance in Al-Ghazali's conception of virtues. That's why the scope of this research, I focusing the elaboration on the understanding of tolerance based on two major ethical works of Al-Ghazali, which is Ihya Ulumuddin and the second one is Mizanul Amal. Ihya Ulumuddin is very well known as his Al-Ghazali's magnum opus, but it is quite mystical or Sufism in nature, whereas Mizanul Amal is recognized by many as more philosophical, but as far as my study is concerned, it's a kind of synthesis from Al-Ghazali, whereas he synthesized the Sufistic approach with the religious or philosophical deliberation. And of course, tolerance have been studied widely from different angles, and this is the method of my research, which I use descriptive analysis to elaborate sufficiently the underlying philosophy of Al-Ghazali's ethical thought, and then I compare those elements with Western understanding of those elements. And then I use a deductive method where I will list all the virtues mentioned by Al-Ghazali, especially in Mizanul Amal, and I will narrow down the virtues based on his definition of Al-Musamahah. Therefore, the relevant virtues to toleration is identified. I go directly to the finding of this research, which the number one is the definition of tolerance itself. Al-Ghazali is not just defined the words Al-Musamahah, but he figured out Al-Musamahah as the virtues between the two vices or the two extreme vices, which Al-Ghazali is identified as Ashakasa and Al-Malak, and also he added two virtues more, Al-Munaqashah wal-Ihmal. This is the method of Al-Ghazali's elaboration in Mizanul Amal, where he elaborate ethical virtues in the very philosophical scheme where he elaborates the ethic and morality by using the framework of the four cardinal virtues. So, as you all know, that the four cardinal virtue is identified the virtues as the means between the two extremes. So, the right one as the extreme vices, which is also known as excess vices, which we can understand as the extreme in terms of his strictness, and the other extreme, which I use the term defect vices, which we can understand as extreme laxity of that virtue. So, it also goes into the extreme. So, in terms of toleration, Al-Ghazali identified two vices as its extreme, which is ashakasa and al-munaqasha. Al-munaqasha as its extreme strict or excess vices, and the al-ihmal or al-maliq as the extreme laxity. Al-Ghazali also explained briefly the idea of ashakasa, or I found its meaning as fractiousness, which means violation with companionship in matter of peace. And the other extreme is al-maliq or flatterer, endearment for association while ignoring the cause of shame. So from this definition of Al-Ghazali's in Mizanul Amal, I found that at least there is four important key terms which need to identify and elaborate, especially from the worldview of Islam, which the first one is ikhtiyar. When we mention the word ikhtiyar, of course it is totally different from what has been understood by the word freedom in current modern discourse, because freedom is widely understood as in the context of liberal and secular worldview. By the word ikhtiyar, it's derived from the root word khair, which means goods. So freedom in Islam is understood as freedom to choose between two options, and therefore we choose a good one. It is the ikhtiyar. That's why in tolerance, it's not totally freedom to express our preference, our opinion, or our action freely, but it is an option between two goods based on the Islamic sources of knowledge, as I mentioned, as one of the important principles of our Islamic understanding of ethic and morality. And also the second one is tayyibin nafs, and also of course the understanding of nafs in our modern understanding has been limited to understanding of the self as a very biological animal, where we put emphasis only on the good self in terms of our physical benefits. Therefore, tolerance is always explained in terms of our political and our sociological needs. However, in our Islamic understanding, the tayyibin nafs is not merely in terms of our physical, our animal and biological elements, but the most important one is our spiritual element, which is the origin of our existence in this world. The third one is umur al-i'tiyadiyah. I think this is also one of the most important key terms on the understanding of tolerance, where Al-Ghazali directly mentioned that tolerance is occur in the matter of a custom. Therefore, I think at least it gives us some impression that tolerance in matter other than i'tiyadiyah is something need to be relooked into. The last one is al-mukhalatah, from the Arabic word al-ikhtilat, where tolerance must occur in good engagement and communication. The whole idea of Al-Ghazali's ethical thought by focusing on tolerance as one of the virtues. The four cardinal virtues spring from the idea from the three faculty of man, which the first one is the faculty of the rational soul. Therefore, from the rational faculty, we may obtain the virtue of wisdom or al-hikmah. And from the faculty of anger, we may obtain the virtue of courage. And from the faculty of appetite, we may obtain the virtue of temperance. And of course, to obtain the virtues, the rational soul must rule the latter faculty, which is the faculty of anger and the faculty of appetite. Therefore, our body obtain stability or moderation. That's why the virtue have its own extreme, which is the excess vices or strictness, and the defect vices or laxity. And the cardinal virtue has its own virtues mentioned by Al-Ghazali simultaneously with its definition. And of course, tolerance is directly stated under the cardinal virtue of Iffah. And of course, all these virtues is not operating separately. It's just highlighted in that table or schedule just to show for the sake of systematic deliberation. But in reality, it's work interconnected at the same time. So a person of tolerance must also have its supporting virtues. From the definition which I highlighted previously, I found that a person of tolerance must also be a person of passion. At the same time, this kind of person must also bravely engage with its two vices, which is al-munaqashah or al-shakasa from its strictness, and also the al-ihmal or al-malaq. And this medium position is not so much physical in nature, like we say is 3 is the middle position between 5, but in this elaboration, the middle position between the virtues and the two extreme vices is quite subjective in nature, and it's different from a person to another. This is my finding number 2. The finding number 1 is directly engaged with Al-Ghazali's elaboration on his Mizan al-Amal, which is quite philosophical yet religiously in nature. But the second one depends more on Al-Ghazali's elaboration from Ihya Ulumuddin, which is identified sabar, which I found as the element from the Sufistic framework as the most important quality of tolerance, as the earlier maqam in our path towards God. If they mean tolerance as neglecting the idea of truth, of moral values, therefore we allow certain practice of belief due to the absence of our judgment of the values, so it is strictly unacceptable. But if we understand tolerance as the earlier maqam towards a higher maqam or station towards the higher station towards God, then this is something understood by the Sufis in their ethical treatise. So beyond tolerance is we have to move from the earlier station to the higher station. Therefore we tolerate because we already have higher station towards that something we disapprove. For example, we disapprove unbelievers because it is the nature of reality that God created. Therefore, we allow it not because we are sabar, because sabar, as according to Al-Ghazali, is full of distress and sorrow, but we allow it because of our ridha toward God's plan and action. So this is my conclusion from Western understanding of man, happiness, and knowledge and freedom, as I elaborate at length in my study, contribute to the understanding of tolerance which based on uncertainty, paradox, which ultimately lead to intolerance. This has been appointed by the Western scholars themselves, namely Karl Popper. He said that unlimited tolerance will lead to the absence of tolerance itself, since we tolerate the intolerance. Meanwhile, our Islamic understanding of man, happiness and knowledge and freedom, of course, lead to proper understanding of tolerance, which have been understood by the scholars in Islamic in the intellectual tradition as based on knowledge, forgiveness, love and justice. So this is my last point, which is the significance of this research, and of course the significance in fulfilling the objective of the study and the significance of the public service. Of course, the proper Islamic intellectual tradition and framework could help policymakers to ask the right question. Proper deliberation based on such tradition and framework is needed in decision making. And of course, I just named some of our policy like Dasar Perpaduan Negara, and recently we have Keluarga Malaysia, which I strongly believe that we have to have a proper deliberation, explanation and understanding of this agenda or policies based on the right and proper understanding based on our worldview of Islam. Otherwise, it has been noted by Al-Ghazali, the ultimate purpose of all the virtues is to achieve or to attain justice. And by justice, it's not merely confined to what we understood as social or political justice, but also justice as a condition where everything in this world, in our understanding of all the ideas, in its proper place. And by proper place, it also signifies that there is position of everything in this world such that it leads ultimately to the proper place of God in ourselves. And the second one, for the lack of spiritual ethical dimension of life, spiritual Islamic ethical treatise is always a starting point for character building. And of course, nowadays we always talk about character building, and since we want to refine our society, but there is no reality in society, but it consists of individual. But of course, to refine the society, therefore we need to refine the individual itself. Therefore, when we talk about National Integrated Plan or Shared Prosperity Vision 2030, maybe we need to relook to what kind of individual we are developing and what kind of model we are using to develop our individual. And of course, the last one, which I think is also important, basically is this postgraduate studies is a kind of intellectual training to ourselves or to the public servant in order to deepening our knowledge and expertise in our particular field. So from that, I think I end my presentation, and I hope that there is some good points taken from my study, and thank you.